Welcome back to my channel. I'm Brian Kafke, and in this video we're going to talk about becoming a tech entrepreneur. I'll be doing an interview with a tech entrepreneur named Javier Luraschi, who founded an AI company to enable data science and machine learning for everybody. You can see his company name there, HAL9. Let's jump in. But before I do, I want to ask you to join my inner circle by supporting me on Patreon, where you get ad-free videos and direct access to me among the benefits. Thank you. So what's this video about, Brian? Well, last year a colleague named Javier Luraschi left his job, a lucrative job mind you, to create a startup company based on the idea of AI for everyone. And I want to talk about things like this because this has been a fantasy of mine my whole life. I want to become like a Bill Gates or Steve Jobs and do all that cool stuff. And the question is, what is it like? And so vicariously we can find out what it's like. And I have been watching the progress of Javier over the last year. And I want to ask him questions that maybe you've been interested in. Have you ever considered starting your own company, going off on your own, doing your own thing, becoming rich? Well, let's talk to Javier and find out what it's like. For instance, what do you do about money? How do you pay the bills? How do you support the kids? Also, find out from him what are the challenges and rewards. What are some lessons learned? And what wisdom does he have to share? And I'm going to take a tangent also because Javier is an expert on artificial intelligence, so it's a good chance to ask him important questions like, where do you see artificial intelligence currently, and where do you see it going into the future, and what advice do you offer aspiring data scientists? So he's going to share his technology adventure, his entrepreneurship adventure, and a lot of good insights that you can use if you decide to go off on your own and start your own business, or just to kind of live vicariously and see what it's all like. Because as you'll see, it's not all rainbows and unicorns. Now, I want to also give you a little background on Javier so you understand he is a deep dive expert on AI. He founded his company, of course, as I mentioned, with a cool name, HAL9. And if you know the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, then you know the reference. He had been a software engineer for RStudio, where he released Sparkly R 1.0, which added support for Apache Arrow. He also co-authored the book Mastering Spark with R by O'Reilly Press, and I'll put a link in the description too to a free online version of that. Prior to that, he'd been a software engineer at Microsoft for years, where he developed numerous services, mainly including artificial intelligence. He has dual degrees in software engineering and mathematics, and he authored numerous software libraries, patents, and scientific publications. And he did something very interesting also. He documented on a day-by-day sort of journal video, which I'll put a link in the description to that, what he was accomplishing each day and where he was planning to go. So it's really an interesting insight into the anatomy of starting your own company. And it's very technical as well because he is a software engineer. And I learned a lot of technical things about just how much you can do with JavaScript, which was the core language he built this product on. You can see a link there, hal9.com. I'll put that in the description. And you can reach out to Javier on LinkedIn and find out more. Okay, so jumping into our interview, I'm with Javier Luraschi, and he is founded a company on data and AI, which I've been following now since he founded it a little over a year ago. And the first thing to do really would make sense is to really introduce the product you've created. And the interview we're going to be doing is going to be getting into questions about what it's like to start a company, founding, and also with your deep experience in data and AI, especially artificial intelligence, advice you can give people who are in that field, and also advice to people who are trying to start their own business and stuff. Something I've always thought about doing. To start off, Javier, if you want to just do a quick demo of what your product is.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. I'm super excited to be here. Let me just share my screen. And yeah, so this is the the product page and also our product. As you mentioned, it's called hal9.com. And just to give a quick overview, we're pretty much trying to make artificial intelligence and data science more accessible to more people. So easy to use artificial intelligence and making it more accessible. So for that, we do have a tutorials page, which if you're completely new, I would recommend you start there. We're actually going to have a free course, at least at the moment, on we call it the fundamentals of AI, when we're going to teach you from the beginning what is AI and data science and machine learning, how do you use it, all these things that you kind of like need as prerequisites to get into more complex topics like the ones that you cover on your channel, Brian, like, you know, like Spark and Python and Dask and all these cool tools. So definitely, if someone is interested, you know, like we recommend them that they sign up for the course. But just to give you a kind of like a quick overview, you know, you can first of all find a lot of examples in our page. So I encourage you just to look at, you know, the different data analyses that are out there. Maybe something piques your eye. One of the ones that I like showing is just, you know, that showcases the product is a little analysis that we did on temperature anomalies, right? So, you know, in this case, what we see is, you know, how temperatures are changing year over year, right? And if you do scatter plot, you know, you can see here that, you know, from the 1800s all the way to year 2000, like definitely like temperatures year over year have been fluctuating up to the, you know, have been trending to the upside. And one of the things that you can do with HAL9 is, you know, apart from doing this, you know, kind of like simple data analysis, you can also do projections. And a projection can be quite simple, right? Like it can be, hey, just, you know, like use a exponential function, right? Or, you know, like you can switch these to a linear function, right? And just kind of like tell me how, you know, how this temperature can change in the future, right? And to us, this is part of the thing that is powerful about HAL9 and what we're excited for. We want to help people run their own analyses. We want them to be interested in data analysis and data science. And we think that there's a lot of power in letting people build their own solutions, right? Now this is like an easy, you know, like a simple visualization and a simple prediction. If we were to start from scratch, we can also do more complex things. We can do things like, for instance, let's try to get data from Reddit, which is, you know, an online forum that many are familiar with. You can get, you know, which subreddit you want to get data from, you know, what are.
And one thing too, just to make sure, because it's what I found impressive too, is you're actually working on your website with a fully functioning HAL9 application. So anybody could go in and do this stuff and play with it.
That's
but it's
true,
also
yeah,
embeddable, and you can use it on your own locations as well.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. You can, you know, everything is running, at least, you know, in these examples that we're showing, is running on the browser, which, you know, like increases privacy and allows us to also give it away for you for free. Yep. And yeah, as Brian was mentioning, we can also embed the functionality. So for instance, in this case, you know, we can get data from Reddit, and then we can do something like sentiment analysis. And sentiment analysis tends to be quite complex. You know, if you wanted to analyze Reddit posts based on the, you know, if the title is positive or negative, all you have to do is at the sentiment block, click title, and that gives you automatically, you know, the sentiment for each post, right? And you can do analysis based on that, or you can add, say, you know, like a bar chart and start figuring out, like, okay, like based on the author, you know, like show me the sentiment and, you know, things like that. You can also make the post, the chart a little bit nicer. As you can see here on the bottom, like everything is kind of like cramped, but you can change the rotation and kind of like figure out, like, you know, who's the people that is posting very positive comments in this Reddit group, and then you can do analysis. And yeah, and then you can export it also. You can say export this pipeline either as HTML, right? And then you can embed it directly on your site. And what is really nice is that, as you were mentioning, is you can just take the HTML, and that HTML, it's still live, right? Like it's still, you know, it's not a static HTML, but it's actually running the predictions and doing all the kind of like AI part directly in your website, right? So it's a really great way of integrating AI into web development projects. We have a Node.js API, we have an NPM package. You can also export it as an API. And we're really trying to be the platform that makes it the easiest to use to people, and also the best in-class integration with web technologies. That's more or less like, you know, the overview.
Okay, cool. And I've noticed you've embraced the pipeline concept, which is getting pretty popular. But what I would say also is your approach to it is also that you can just go in and use visuals, drag and drop, drag things around, play with it, and it's doing the work behind the scenes, as opposed to you have to go in and write code like in Python or R to do everything.
Yeah, no, that's super important. As one of our biggest differentiators is that, yes, you can just do drag and drop, you know, to produce powerful, you know, visualizations and predictions. But, you know, we have an open core philosophy. So basically all the code behind our runtime and blocks, it's open source. So you can go and modify it, right? I mean, yeah, you can change, you know, in this case, You can change the margins directly here, whatever that margin is.
Yeah.
And we also have support for Python and R. So you can add like a Python block.
Yep.
And, if you choose to,
Nice.
you can add that functionality. But, because we believe in integration, we believe in, there's also like a very rich Python community, but we're focused mostly on web technologies. And, like if we have to, if there's functionality that is not available, you can write the Python code or the R code that lets you unblock that functionality. So yeah, that's
Nice.
for sure.
So that was kind of the background. But now that we've done that, I guess the first thing I'm curious about is like what inspired you to start this company and go on your own and just do it?
But really, the thing that inspired me, I don't know if you're familiar with Andrew Yang, like not really as a politician, but as someone that has really showcased the human side of automation. He's talked a lot about universal basic income and all these things, right? And that's the thing that really made me realize that there's something going on, right? Like, like if you were asking me as a kid, like, hey, how is the future? Like, what's the future of automation? I would have thought, like in my crazy kid mind that, like maybe we would have like Terminators, like as cashiers, like, or something like that, right? And, something like very dystopian future. And that's not really happening. But well, what really opened my eyes is like, if you look at what is one of the most common jobs in the US is a cashier, right? It's, you pack and you charge for items. And it's pretty common now today to see, we already have robots, right, doing that job. And it's not what I would look like or what I think that they look like, which is like proper robots, right? But they come in the form of like self-checkout, right? And self-checkout is automating a bunch of jobs, and you can only do self-checkout because like you have tools like data science and Spark that allows you to analyze, like, hey, what's the incidents of robbery or mistakes that people can do, and the types of items, and you have video, and so you basically put all these systems that little by little are automating different parts of different jobs, right? So to me, the really interesting thing was like, like automation is really taking a big chunk of the jobs out there, and like how what does the future of jobs look like? And I do feel like it's a bit of a problem that we're going to face in the next, say, 10, 20 years. Yeah. We started with this very grand vision, and part of the job on this first year has been like distilling it down to something we can actually build. Yeah, in general, the solution to me is we need more people and more companies to provide resources for people to take advantage of artificial intelligence and data science, right? Like, I think it would be a better world. I don't know if we're going to get there, but it would be a better world if people automate their own jobs, because then it's like they're still creating the same amount of value, but they can spend more time in their hobbies, with their family, whatever they want. So kind of like the solution for us is like, okay, let's try to build a product that makes that a little bit easier, right? And in reality, it's a combination of education and product. And, there's a lot of things to do to fix beyond just the product or creating just a product.
What were the biggest concerns you had going into this? And maybe you could also compare that to the actual problems you encountered and how much they aligned. Because I know doing something on your own, you're like, if you have your fears, and then you have reality. So
yeah. I mean, honestly, I mean, one of the biggest problems that I knew from the beginning is that I'm a software engineer. I've been a software engineer for more than 10 years, almost 20, and I knew that selling the product was gonna be hard. Mostly because that's not something that I'm like super familiar with, and it's one of those things that I knew that it was gonna be hard. I knew that it was going to be hard, but not to what degree, right? I thought, like I underestimated. I didn't know what I did. I did not know. And I'm still today, I think the focus for us this year is going to be like, okay, like how do we reach out people that are interested in using it? Like, who's that? And, how do we sell it? Can we sell it? Sure. So definitely there was that. I think the other one was a lot of people told me like, hey, don't be a solo founder, find a co-founder. But it's like, it's one of those problems that is like chicken and egg. It's like, well, like you can't really find a co-founder, like that easily, right? It's almost like getting married or whatever. So sure. I would say for people that have that problem of not having a co-founder, I would say it's, if you're convinced, like you should just start it and do it, and, just be open to like people helping you out. Because it's also tough to say, hey, like, do you want to quit a job with me, like next year? I mean, that's scary, right? But like, if someone sees you and he's like, hey, I already quit my job, like that, I feel like it definitely helps to see someone that is like, okay, like they did the first step and, maybe sure. They join later or something. Yeah.
And I tend to think like a co-founder is like marriage. It's like, yes, if it's a good co-founder and you have trust and you can build, but you get the wrong one and it can
Yeah,
be
then it's
much
terrible.
worse
So
than being on your own.
yeah, yeah, no, that's also for sure. I don't think those types of relationships you can force.
Yeah.
It might be better just to do it on your own. But like it's also a lot of work, right? So having I think in my particular case, it's not that I have like 100% co-founder, but it's more like I end up finding out like a handful of people that are interested in the project and are willing to help.
Yep.
So I consider them kind of like my co-founder, where we're walking together. But
Yeah.
either one way or another one, getting help is super useful, I think. Yeah.
So what advice would you give aspiring entrepreneurs, somebody else who's thinking of doing something similar?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one, but I would say, the usual just do it. But I do feel like at some point, if you're thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, like you should just do it. But it's not, I don't think there's a good time to be an entrepreneur. Honestly, I don't know how you feel about that, but like, I think when you get out of college, you have like time and you have the energy, but like you don't have really the experience, right? Like the industry experience of like being there. And then a lot of us like get married, have kids, and then it's like, okay, I have some experience but I don't have the time. And then like then you might be, your kids might be older or whatever, and then it's like, okay, like now I have the time and experience but maybe not as much energy, right? And so I think that it's always really complex. Like I don't know if there's like a good time to be like, oh yeah, being an entrepreneur. What I would say is that the just do it part, I don't think it means like, oh, I'm just gonna do it and I'm just gonna do it tomorrow and quit everything. Because as we just mentioned, it's more of a long-term endurance race, right? So like there's definitely time for you to think through and be like, okay, like what's the best way of doing it, like plan, like make sure that you have things aligned. Like you definitely have time to read books or like get advice from people. But I do think that the biggest advice is that like you're never going to be prepared. It's kind of like being a parent for those of us or you that are our parents. Is like no one is prepared. No one is prepared to become a parent, right? Like there's just so much that you don't know. Right. At some point, you need to do it. It just doesn't mean that you need to have a kid during high school, right? It's like you can try to wait for the right time. When things are stable and you thought it through and you try to prepare the best you could. But at some point, you're never going to be prepared enough. So you just do your best. And yeah.
And I think one thing I've noticed too is when you make a leap, that like in your case, you had a lot of software engineering experience, you had the AI experience, and you're going into something in that field. I think it's like if you said, I'm going to, become a magician entertainer in Las Vegas, your risk is a lot higher because you're not in the space, So
yeah, I mean, for people that are in my career path, well, not career, but career stage, I would say that, yeah, definitely, if you already work like 10 years in somewhere, right? That has a lot of value. And, one of the things that I learned recently, unfortunately, I think it's that we could have actually we could have gotten money without a product from angels. There's different types of getting money from friends and family, angels, VCs. And I learned that people that have been on the industry for a while usually can get money just by saying is like, hey, like I've already spent like 10 years, I have this thing, I want to go in that direction. So yeah, like that seems like a reasonable path. Just, gather some experience and then try to get some funding. But, like I also I did not walk that path, so it might not have worked. I don't know. I mean, you'll have to interview someone else that does the jump directly, but yeah.
So that's part of the learning process.
Yeah, no, that's
it's unavoidable. Sure.
Yeah.
What about money? You've got to pay your mortgage. You got to pay. Kids are expensive. If you got young kids, diapers are very expensive. So
yeah.
What do you do for that?
Yeah, well, I think to us were two things. One is you just need to save money, right? Like, I mean, and you can do it in multiple different ways. But you need to save. You need to save money. I don't know if there's a way around it. And the other one that to us was a bit more of a, it was honestly, well, I guess it was kind of lock or unlock. Anyways, it's basically when I was going to start this, COVID had already started, and kind of like COVID forced us to reduce our expenses significantly. So I think other people can, you can always lower your expenses, right? Like actually before then we moved to a lower, like an outsider area of the Seattle area, which is a little bit more cost effective. But then like also COVID hit, and like that cut like I think many people's expenses, mostly because like where are you gonna travel? I mean, nowhere, right? Like you're gonna be at home, and our kids, for instance, were on private school here in the Seattle area, and that private school, it didn't close, but they went fully digital, and that wasn't working for us. So I think COVID forced us just to lower our expenses significantly, which increased the runway, because it's like, okay, we already saved, and then on top of that you have COVID, and like now but I really do believe that anyone can reduce expenses. It's just really painful, right? And in our case, I think it might have been easier because COVID forced us to save money, well, to reduce our expenses.
Yeah,
but it definitely would be harder, I think. Like if you have a job, your friends have a stable job, and then you need to make the leap because it's like, well, you're the only one doing it, and like it feels like you're losing a lot. But yeah, like I mean, it's definitely not easy, but it's also not rocket science, right? Like reducing your expenses is not rocket science. It's not rocket science. It's just really painful, right? And
what I took from that was save money beforehand,
yeah,
reduce your costs, and in some cases, if you have a spouse that can help they keep money coming in, that can't hurt either. What do you think are the biggest challenges in data science and AI currently, and where do you see that going?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one challenge, I think for data science specifically, I think especially as it becomes more, as more people jump into this field, and I think one of the challenges is how do you find trust, and how you trust people? How do you trust data scientists that are good versus someone that is not? I think that's a challenging thing, because anyone can do a chart, especially with tools like Tableau, Excel, or HAL9.
Right.
But and that definitely has a lot of benefits, but also like it makes it a little bit more noisy to figure out like, okay, who do I trust, right? And it's not just a matter of figuring out, hey, I'm just going to trust blindly the people that are well known in the area. I have one specific example that I'll mention it. As at the beginning of the pandemic, there was someone kind of like doing day to day or week to week updates on the pandemic, and to me it was frustrating. For instance, that like all the charts were not normalized by per capita. So at the very beginning, I was like, we were comparing the U.S. number of cases against like England, right? And it's like, and the narrative was, hey, like the US is doing pretty bad because it's growing like at two, cases are growing twice as fast as England. And it really rubbed me the wrong way, because it's like, well, yeah, like I mean, the US has like 300 million inhabitants. Like I don't know how many inhabitants there in England, but like probably
A lot
like
less.
a 10, yeah, a lot less, right? Like 30 million.
Oh.
It's anyway. So like even in those, because it's not just a problem of trusting like the person, the people that are that everyone is trusting, but it's just like what data analysis do you trust, and how do you make sure that they're not biased, right? And we could be on a better world if we could make changes to the analysis ourselves. Right now in data science, reproducibility is like a huge area, like being able for everyone to run the same data analysis.
So for people who are starting out as data scientists, do you have any advice and do's and don'ts?
I think there's currently a preconception that in order to become a data scientist, you really need to get a master's. You need to go through that process of going to college, getting a master's, and then you become a data scientist. So obviously, if people in listening to this or watching this video have the opportunity to go through that standard career path, that makes a lot of sense. Because that's what seems to be working for data scientists today. But I do question that. I do see that learning and it's changing a lot, especially with the pandemic, with online learning, all these things. So I think the biggest suggestion that I have for aspiring data scientists or new data scientists would be to look into competitions. Like there's websites like Kaggle that they can pick any challenge to whatever degree of complexity they have, and just practice, right? And I think I don't know. I mean, I don't know the future, but I do think that the way college works today is likely to change with online learning and the pandemic and all these things. So I think that being self-taught data scientist is something that is going to happen, and starting to happen. But like it's definitely important because I mean maybe Brian, you can elaborate on this, but you don't want to take just one course. Say the HAL9 course is like a great way to start and to become a data scientist, but you don't want to end there, right? So you definitely want to have jump from from that to something more complex, to do exercises in Kaggle, to challenge yourself, and you need to put the hours, right? So I don't know, Brian, do you have something to add there?
Well, I was thinking to what you said earlier too, is like you're in one job. And I think a lot of people who are moving into data science, I think this is a great thing, might be data engineers or data analysts or business, not domain experts. And perfect person who probably could very intuitively move into data science, say in a hospital, is somebody who's been working for 20 or 30 years in a hospital doing analysis. And now they just have to kind of acquire the additional skills. So sometimes it doesn't have to be starting fresh, but even just migrating over from other skill sets.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's a great point. You basically want to leverage what you know, right? Because
what do you see as the direction now that you're going to be taking HAL9 and yourself?
I've been technical. I've been a software engineer for many years. So to us right now, like the challenge is, right, like can we get people excited, to jump into HAL9 and try it out, right? So really what we're trying to do is outreach to people and, just let them know what we have, helping them out, bring them along to concepts like data science, data analysis, artificial intelligence, and just kind of grow that, right? So to us, I mean, obviously we're going to keep growing the product. There's features that we want to add, like better support for programming languages like Python, that really kind of expand the scope of what you can do on HAL9. But a lot of it is honestly just connecting to people. If you have a problem, or something that you're like, oh, I wish I could, I work on a company, I wish I could do this analysis, reach out to us. Maybe there's a way of, doing it in HAL9 and we can help you out. So yeah, for us is kind of the next 3-6 months is making sure that there's enough people, gravitating around HAL9 that find it useful and find joy in using it. Definitely looking forward for feedback. If you're listening to this channel and you play a little bit with HAL9, please do leave a comment or, send me you can find me on Twitter or whatever. And just, I would super appreciate the feedback. Yeah.
Thoughts about going with JavaScript initially?
Yeah.
Was that the ideal choice in the end? And how do you see Python and R fitting in?
Yeah. So actually when I was starting the project, it was not my plan to use JavaScript. I still have a sketch somewhere. You can probably look at the first videos on my channel, right, and you'll see that the original concept was, hey, we're going to create a desktop application that allows you to use something like PyTorch, as a backend. 100% believe this, that the best way of building user interfaces is with web technologies, right? Including JavaScript, React Native or Vue or whatever framework, right? So that's how I started building HAL9 is, with web technologies. I 100% believe that. And but then the interesting thing and the interesting interactions there were, once I started going towards that path, I found out it's like, wait a moment, I can do a little bit more with JavaScript, right? It's like, I basically started delaying integrating Python and PyTorch and all these things. And I was like, well, I just need to do a chart, right? And you'll see, if you watch my YouTube channel, I'm a very incremental person. I don't tend to plan 3 years in advance or something, but it's like, I started coding and it's just solve the next immediate problem. So, I built the basics of the desktop application. And then I was like, hey, I need to put a chart. And he's like, well, JavaScript is pretty good at charts. It's actually arguably better than Python and R at charting. So I put, a D3 chart and I'm like, that's cool. And then I was like, well, I need to do a data transformation. And he's like, should I bring Python for that? And he's like, no, I can do some of the data transformation with JavaScript, right? So I kind of fall by mistake in, into this kind of space of JavaScript, right? And it's surprising how far we were able to get. Because eventually, at some point, I think it was second month or something like that, we started integrating TensorFlow.js, which is basically a port of TensorFlow, which is one of the leading deep learning AI frameworks, into JavaScript, right? And I played with it and it's like, yeah, this is working out. And then, 6 months afterwards, we got Anshit to join us. he's a data scientist, and he took a look at JavaScript, and he changed the product from using JavaScript to using a library called Arcero that supports up to 1 million records. And now the end of the story is that, we were able to get pretty far with JavaScript, but we did hit, I don't want to say a limit, but we did end up hitting a boundary at some point, right? Which is where we're at today, where we're like, okay, like we were able to do so many things with JavaScript, and we're pretty happy where we're at. But like, okay, like what about X and Y's, and like how do we do those things? And that's where we look back and we were like, okay, like there's cases where you need to use Python or R. And like still, like right now our focus is, we're pretty happy with web technologies and JavaScript. We're kind of like invested on that like 80%. And then for the remaining things, is like, okay, just use Python, train the model. If you really need a GPU, if the algorithm is not available, just use it there. But yeah, it was mostly kind of like an incremental approach, and I'm still super happy where.
Yep. Well, I was actually surprised when I was watching your channel, because I was following, especially early on, and it was very impressive, because I say, I didn't know you could do that in JavaScript. And you're like, I found this library that lets you do this. Like, really? And I was like, he's like, wow. And so I was really surprised to see all these tools. Like, wow, there's a huge ecosystem.
Someone is listening and is already an expert on JavaScript, right? I would actually encourage them to explore like what's out there on the JavaScript space, right? Because
if you were to start all over again, being back in time and talk to your younger self a year or two ago, what would you tell yourself about this adventure?
That's definitely painful. I honestly, I have two answers. The first one is, I really believe that, I try to live life with no regrets. So, if, whatever got you up to this point, were the right choices, just because those were the right choices for you and you're up to that point. So like, I personally don't have any regrets whatsoever. But I think if I were to tell myself something, I think it would have had a lot of value for me to not start with the technical tasks, right? Whatever, maybe I had to build a little bit of confidence, as a new entrepreneur, but like, I think it would have been very important for me to start, to block myself from coding anything and force myself to start with the business task, right? Like, can you try to get money? Can you try to get customers? Can you talk to them? Can you build a business plan? Can you, explain what you're trying to solve? Like all these things are super important. Don't go and do those tasks that are like the things that you already know how to do, right? Like, go and try to build the product, right? Because those are the things that are really going to challenge you early on. And you're probably going to figure out that you need a co-founder, or you really need to push your skills. So I don't want this answer to be interpreted as, the business tasks are the most important tasks. You should always start with those. The way that I would explain it is like, if you're technical, start with the business tasks. If you're like a business person, start with the technical tasks, because those are the things that you don't even know what you don't know, right?
So I guess this is sort of the wrap up kind of question, but what do you feel now as sort of looking back of successes, challenges, aha moments that you've come to?
Yeah, that's really tricky, because, if you look at the day-to-day thing that I've been doing, like just recording daily videos of progress, it's so frustrating because you don't see any progress whatsoever. And I definitely feel that way, right? Like, if I look at what I did yesterday, it's like, oh my God, like, same thing, like things are not moving, like it's just so easy to not see any progress whatsoever. Because you're just on the grind, and, like, honestly, nothing really changed from what I did, like 5 days ago, right? It's like same thing, right? But if you look, if I take a step back and really like at the end of the year, I had like a checkpoint, right? And it's like, okay, should I do this another year? Because, like that, a year is like a long time.
Right.
And I think if you look backwards, right? And myself looking at least backwards, right? If I had told myself, hey, by the end of the year, like you'll have, like a group of people that are all passionate about working on this, and you'll talk to investors, like, and you'll know how to do this, you'll create your own company, and you had already raised money, and you'll have paying customers, like real paying customers, maybe not as many as you thought you would have, but, like there's some paying customers. Like, I think the progress is huge. And, but you can only see that progress in retrospect, taking like a big jump of like where you started, where you're at today. Mm-hmm. And I would also say that it's not what I expected, right? Like, I wasn't planning to have a team or, really have raised money. My goal at the beginning is like, well, I'll just work on this on my own, and hopefully by the end of the year I'll be profitable.
Yeah.
That was kind of like completely unrealistic. So yeah, I think I look back at it, and it was worth it, but it was not it was not necessarily my definition of success that I had on day one.
From somebody outside who's been watching videos, I could definitely see like, oh, okay, it started out with like wireframe drawings and sketches, and I'm like, all right, then it's like, wow, there's a screen, and I could see you adding like data loading components and then moving into the pipeline pieces. So like from what I see now versus what I saw say a year ago, it's a huge difference. All right, well, let's actually finish the questions and everything, and I want to thank you, Javier, for popping in and doing these questions and everything. That was a great interview with Javier. We covered a lot of grounds. I hope you learned a lot about what it's like to start your own company. Maybe got some inspiration. I know I did. And I also learned a lot technically about it. Again, links in the description. You can go watch Javier's day-by-day progress or jump to the end and just see where he's at now. This year he's starting to go week by week, I believe, to do videos, just summarizing things. So have a look at it. I want to thank you for watching. Please put comments. Love to hear what your questions and thoughts are. Please like, share, subscribe. Until next time, I'm pulling for you. We're all in this together. Thank you.